And so we invited Bishop Hutter here and Brad Monroe in order to maybe get some of those questions answered. And so Bill, did you have anything else you want to say, or do we want to open the floor to questions? I can run the mic to anybody. All right, you're going to start. Okay.
Does it work? Testing 1, 2, 3. I'm going to lighten it up a little with a story, okay? Is that all right? Okay. So it was 1959. It was in a little town called Waterford, Wisconsin, heart of Lutheranville. And I was chasing golf balls. It was a very wealthy country club, and I was 9 years old. And I would get a golf ball and go sell it to the golfers. And this one golfer gave me a shiny 50-cent piece for, wow, this is it. I can go home now, buy candy. But there was a commotion off into the field next to the golf course. And so I ran over to see what was going on. There was like 10 cars pulling up, and I certainly realized quickly it was a revival. In the old-fashioned, everybody ever been to an old-fashioned revival? No? That's pretty interesting. Speaking was this beautiful black preacher, and he was hell and brimstone, raising his hands, everyone on their chairs. It was quite a scene. And at the end of the service, he said, "Now, ladies and gentlemen, don't be hurting the Lord's tender ears with the harsh sound of coins in that plate, but soothe them with the soft sounds of lettuce." So he's walking down the aisle with the plate, and it's like a story out of a Christmas Story, the famous movie, where things get enlarged and slow down, and I'm there sitting in the back trying to get small, and he came up to me with a plate, and he was a gorgeous man, gray beard, dressed in white, he looked like God, and he put the plate in front of me, and I took my 50-cent piece out, and I went doink in the plate. And he said, "Lord Jesus, this young man, he gave his candy money to the Lord." He goes, "Let's pass the plate again." I knew God had my back. That was the first moment. And he's got our back today. We have some difficult things to talk about and discuss. I've prayed about what I'm about to say, because I don't want to oversell things or give any kind of false hope. It's unauthorized, for full disclosure. I moved to Arizona in 1976 as a clinical psychologist. I practiced here over a decade, taught at universities and community colleges. That morphed into a career with Maricopa County Sheriff's Office in threat assessments, profiling, major crimes. I did that 24 years, retired 2 years ago. But I've always had a commercial real estate license. That's how I've made my money. Other occupations just didn't quite pay with the kind of lifestyle that I wanted, and my charitable work was more with the psychology end of things, helping people as I could through life. So I put together a little presentation. It won't be long. I'm going to just kind of tell the presbytery. Am I saying that correctly? Presbytery. Sorry. So that you know what you have, what we have, what God has. God owns that. I mean, we're entitled of it, and we're stewards of it. This is the plot map you can see, and I don't know why Beth had many temples there, but if you go to another Google map, you'll see Gloria Christi Federated Church. So this is the one I was able to download. You have 4.47 acres total. It is zoned special use permit, which means that the city of Paradise Valley had to grant a use for a church or for another type of use. The chances are this ever becoming a commercial piece of real estate are zero. I've already talked to them. This is the plan that overlays this area is for residential single lot, 43,560 square foot homes. So based upon that, you've got some challenges, and this is whether We close October 27th, or we figure out a way to turn some money at the behest of the Presbyterian to keep us going for a while. You have to do all the things I'm about to recite. So zoning, no problem. They would remove the special use permit and allow the density for 4 houses on the property. You have approximately 119,000 square feet on the parcel to the left, where the word Beth is, and then you have approximately 89,000 on the property to the right where the church is located. If you were to grant an easement, which is another milestone you have to surpass and get through planning and zoning, on the top part of where our parking lot is, there's a strip of land that would still be titled to the Presbytery. If you were to grant an in perpetuity easement, you now have access to the 2 areas, the far left and the small area that's in red to the right of it. That is 147,000 square feet. It would support 3 residences. Hydrology, that's another issue with engineering, and that I cannot attest to that, but whomever buys this property has to go through all these hoops, and it's their problem, not ours. So I'm not saying we need to go hire engineers or studies or anything, but if we were to put it on to sell, these are the steps people would have to go through. So you have hydrology issues, you have ingress and egress, and you don't have to file a subdivision report with the state of Arizona, which is a year-long program, and it's very intricate and expensive because you have to do studies. Not our problem, next guy's problem, but it's not necessary because there are less than 6 lots subdivided. That's the Arizona law. So what do you have? If you sell those 3 lots, it would be a private road that would come in off of Gloria Christi, and it would go along Lincoln, because they will not let you come in on Lincoln. It's a 40-mile-an-hour zone. They will not let you stop and turn into a private drive. So you have to have that access road. And you have these 3 lots, and I've done about 12, 15 comps in the area of what the property would be worth per lot. And we have acre lots in Paradise Valley that are worth $2.5 million, but they're up on the side of a mountain with the views. And we have lots like an Invergordon flat lot, already cleaned up, ready to go for $1.2 million. So because this has got a 5-star address on East Lincoln, and it would be some sex appeal, because you would have 3635 East Lincoln Unit 1, you know, and that's kind of Paradise Valley. You like that kind of sex appeal for your value. Actually, being on Lincoln is a bit of a disadvantage because of the traffic noise and the pollution caused by the 45,000 cars that go by a day. So based upon that, I would say that probably the valuation of that 3.47 acres is about $4.5 million. I'm doing $1,350,000 per acre, and of course that's prior to closing costs and you know, and studies and those and commissions and stuff. But I think that would generate easily, and still we would have a church on the bottom acre and a quarter where the parking lot is, and our church is shown in that map. That's another $1.5 million one day for the Presbyterian, and it you know, but if you were to take a $4.5 million asset, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I get 6% even in a terrible economy like this. That's $250,000 a year just in interest for the first year. If we have a $50,000 shortfall with a full-time pastor, that's 5 years running time with just the interest from the first year. But I'm sure there's uses that the Presbyterian would use it for. I look out there, it's not helping one human being on this planet. It's dirt. And I was trying to come up with something creative where there would be cash and some kind of an agreement we could work out where we would have adequate funds to keep rolling for a while with a full-time pastor. but yet have God's money be used for some of the, very wonderful things I'm sure the Presbytery is engaged in with missions or whatever have you. And you could do an actuarial table as that money is being used, and if we could just get the interest off of it, dedicated to us in some kind of a fund, special use fund, we would be around for a while. And God's still got our backs. Always will. Any questions?
My question is, to the Presbytery, is that possible?
I would say yes, that's possible. But even as I say that, I say that as Presbytery pastor, knowing that we are a committee and commission-based structure. So what would make that possible is there would need to be a submission of a kind of a formal study and a revitalization plan of, all right, so how is this going to work? And what will be done to create a viable, sustainable future? And then that goes to our resources committee, and resources committee then makes a recommendation to our leadership commission. So being on both those committees, Paul is on resources committee, so he kind of knows this process too. That type of plan would be submitted to resources. They would take action on it and then make the recommendation to leadership. My sense is that is a possible yes, but on the other hand, we also want to know, is there a viable, sustainable future?
What does the timeline look like to submit that process?
The timeline is open-ended because the Presbytery will not compel you to close, right? So you all can gather as long as you want, and the Presbytery is not going to compel action. We have done that precisely once in my 10-year tenure, and it was an extraordinary circumstance that connects with 72 cats living in the sanctuary, and a very uncomfortable call from the deputy sheriff with complaints from the neighbors. I won't tell you the full story, but we compelled action in that circumstance. We will not compel action in this circumstance, nor have we in other similar. So you do have time. If the congregation votes to respond to the board's, what I perceive to be a thoughtful, well-reasoned, well-researched plan of closure and dissolution, we will respond to that. So whatever you all decide in your congregational vote, we will respect and honor, and we will walk alongside you to the best of our ability to help engage that decision. Which doesn't really tell you a ton, but that except that we're collaborators, we're partners, we're in this together, and it is not our intent nor interest to force a particular decision.
Yeah, I have a question here. One more. Again, kind of a clarification, but as I understand it, PCUSA owns the land, but they don't own the building. The building belongs.
That's incorrect.
Okay, so you own the building as well?
We own all properties held in trust for the Presbytery.
Okay.
So the property reverts to the Presbytery.
Even if the original congregation mortgaged it and paid for the building, it doesn't matter.
We would assume that mortgage.
It's paid.
Yeah, but if it's paid, all properties all that property reverts to the presbytery upon dissolution of the congregation. I mean, that's just our bylaws.
So then why wouldn't you, at this point in time, recognize the deferred maintenance costs to keep the building in a viable function? Why wouldn't you come up with the money then to pay for that and do those rather than have the congregation try to come up with that money to keep the building usable?
If we had access to those dollars, it would be under consideration. We don't have access to those dollars. For instance, just to give you a sense of where we're at, we have 2 properties on the Navajo Nation where there are health and safety issues, perhaps even life-threatening issues related to the church and the manse in the properties in Ganado and Cayenta. And those are fairly poor communities, and they don't have the resources to do the asbestos remediation, all the work that needs to be done. We've been working with those churches for a couple years, and we're just now being able to fund the asbestos remediation on the 2 manses. And we're struggling to find the funds to help that project, because we don't have it in our ability to support those 2 congregations with their asbestos problem. And those properties are going to need to be bulldozed, and new homes, new manse built or put on those properties, probably a manufactured house. And we're not sure where that money's coming from. We don't have it. And so, like every organization, we're doing the best we can to triage the decision-making and resource whatever communities we can in a kind of a prioritization order of like, all right, so how can we help this church continue to move forward? And we're a couple years out in Ganado and Cayenta, and that's, just try to solve one problem at a time. So if we had, according to, what's the estimate on 500,000? Yeah, if we had 500,000 that we could give to this project, well, then we could have a conversation. We don't have 500,000 to give to such a project. And so, until we do, the conversation is stilted.
Let me ask you this then. Is there any, I expect there's some kind of preclusion from the church here, the board, seeking refinance of the building to pay those, pledging the building to the lender. I would assume Presbytery wouldn't go along with that.
Well, you are welcome to ask. My sense of the history is that Presbytery would look very carefully at your ability or the likelihood of your ability to be able to repay that, because we would be the guarantor on that loan. We would have to go through the Presbyterian Investment Loan Program. And PILT would be looking at your books. We'd be looking at your books, but then PILT would look at the books. And if it looked like you had a likelihood of being able to pay that off, then PILT would say yes. If the PILT looked at your finances and said it's unlikely, they're probably going to say no. Paul, correct me if I misspeak here. I mean, that's my sense of how that conversation would go.
Okay. So basically, bottom line, the chances are slim and none.
Probably.
Okay.
I haven't heard the Jewish temple mentioned in any of these discussions. You mentioned that Beth Temple is on our plot map, and you know, they have become important partners to Gloria Christi before we became Gloria Christi, and this church also is very unique in that we are supportive of the LGBTQIA+ community in a way that is extremely rare. We've visited other churches with friends, and you know, places claim to be supportive of that community, but they won't ordain, or they claim to be supportive, but they won't marry. As you know, our brothers and sisters in both of those communities are having a hard time right now. And so it's really important to continue to have safe places for folks to be. And so I'd like to hear what people think about that and what would happen with that temple and with the dearth of churches that provide that kind of safe harbor for the LGBTQIA folks.
Bill, do you want to speak to the
I'll speak to the LGBTQ from the Presbyterian side. I guess I don't need that. I'll turn on my mic.
Maybe. I'm on, but I'm about to choke myself here. Just a moment. There. In response to the temple folks, we've had some conversations with them. They're aware that we are in this process of trying to discern, our future. We wanted them to be prepared, for whatever eventuality would happen. This congregation has hosted them for a long time. Over 50 years. And so we took that very seriously as Ann and I shared with them kind of where we're at wrestling with them. Their first response was to look at me and go, well, gee, maybe you could be our rabbi and we could combine. Well, I do a lot of things, and while that would be a great honor and adventure, I probably shouldn't do that. My Hebrew isn't up to snuff. And as we talked, it's tough, but at the same time, within a mile of this church, I can name 3 churches that would probably be willing to host them if they asked them. There's a Universalist Unitarian Church down on the end of Lincoln before you get to Tatum. There's a United Methodist Church. There's I think it's a Disciples of Christ, and I think an Episcopal Church, all right here. And my hunch is, from what I know of those denominations, they would be very, very open to hosting them. And so I don't think that's, while we feel bad and we love the fact that they've had a safe haven here, at the same time, looking at the realities of things, I would love to say, hey, would you guys like to buy the building? And then we rent from you. But they're not in a position to be able to do that either.
In terms of the LGBTQIA+ community, the Presbyterian Church as a denomination has our official policy is local option, but the vast majority of Presbyterian churches are open and affirming. One of our churches on the west side of Mesa is called Celebration of Life, and that is their core value and their missional focus is to be open and affirming, to have both in ordination, marriage, membership, and open and affirming stance. Their new pastor that is going to start in a few weeks is a lesbian, so they welcome that kind of leadership. 9 minutes away is Orangewood Presbyterian, church, and they are open and affirming. They are not as intentionally and publicly focused as y'all, and certainly not as open and focused as Celebration of Life. But there are Presbyterian churches where openness is part of their core value.
And ELCA churches that are open and affirming, including those that are reconciling in Christ, that are within 10 miles of this radius. The other thing I just wanted to, I appreciate the conversation. I'm going to stand up because I'm short. I know that you've been having conversation over many weeks now. And I think that finances are one part of the conversation, but I hope that you could, what I heard you in the very first conversation when I was here in June, it's really about mission. And are you committed to the mission of the proclaiming Jesus Christ and what that looks like and the work that it takes to do that? Mm-hmm. So I think that there are a lot of different ways to do it. We are also, I would say for the Grand Canyon Synod, Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, what we want are thriving, healthy churches. And we want to do what we can to be supportive of that. And so I think really the question, if you decide that you are a missional community, then you really want it, you're committed to this, you have the energy and the passion, we'll figure out the other pieces to it. But I think that's the question, is do you have the energy and passion to do what it takes? Because we can tell you, leadership matters. Pastoral leadership matters, but lay leadership is critical. And it will make, that's what really makes viable communities, growing, healthy, thriving communities.
Sure. In the event we do close and the presbytery sells the property and realizes a huge cash value, how will that money be used? I mean, do we have any influence over that some of it could be allocated to other communities like ours or like the Navajo Nation community that you described?
The answer is yes and yes. So what we would do is, or what we have done in the past, all right? So our practice is to allow the local congregation to give a percentage of the receipt of sale, the net receipts, to ministries of their choosing. We often negotiate with the board and the congregation, depending on the situation, to recommend some presbytery level connection. We would probably in this instance say, hey, it should be a presbytery or Presbytery and Lutheran connection, and give a list of recommendations. Although if you all said, no, we have this one that is our heart, we want this one, we'd probably have a negotiation. We'd talk together. It would be something we'd want to work out. With the remainder, that is designated by the Leadership Commission of the Presbytery. And I mean, I can tell you our likely candidates, right? Mount Laura Summer Camp, Native American Ministries, New Worshiping Communities. Paul, what other kind of are the likely candidates there?
Well, there have been some new worshiping communities that the Presbytery has supported, and these would be new worshiping communities that are just starting,
yeah,
and trying to build a presence within the community. The Resources Committee has considered issues in that regard for some of the funds. I guess probably you mentioned it, the most overriding pressing issue that the Presbytery has with resources is the Native American community churches. They,
Montlore though too.
well, yes, that's true, because they just opened, but, I agree with that.
Yeah, so, but this is the kind of conversation we have at Resources as we try to discern, all right, where's the need to direct resources to create, I like your words, thriving, vibrant, healthy community. And so that's what we look at as well. But again, we figure out a portion for you all to direct, because we want to honor not only the sense of grief and sadness of this moment if it turns out that you all do close, but we want to, through our use of directing resources, convey a message about the Christian faith, that death leads to resurrection, and that if there's a closing, it's a seed planted in the ground that is to grow and bear fruit. And so to allow you all or to allow a closing church, and we've done this in the past, to direct some of those resources, say, yeah, we want to be a part of this. We want agency here. I think is not only the right thing theologically, but it's also the right thing in terms of our sense of being community together. So that's how we look at that, and that's how we handle it.
Does either the Lutheran or Presbytery have any churches like ours that they could amalgamate with us to give that robust?
Celebration of Life would be for us.
Okay, so you have one that would join us here?
Well, I don't know if they would join you or you would join them, but Celebration of Life would be the most likely candidate on the Presbyterian side.
For folks who are here,
Yes.
But not for them to join us here.
I don't think that from the Lutheran side, I don't know any that would be, you've done the federation thing here.
Right.
And so
Hard part, yeah.
and it's been the hard part, and all of the work that you did to kind of figure out property and monies and all of those things. So it would be honoring the agreements that you made as you stepped into this, and maybe going other places to provide seed and to help other communities grow.
Well, I have to say I'm thrilled about the idea of driving to East Mesa to find a church that's, okay, West Mesa, to find a church that's LGBTQIA friendly. That's not a great solution, but stepping back for a moment, Paul mentioned that the monies could be spent, that the Presbytery could spend the monies on new churches that are trying to get established. And I view our church as a new church. You know, we combined, we looked at that circle, churches start here, there's this life cycle, and then they die. But they only die if nothing changes. We changed. We became Gloria Christi. And we have not been given the chance to see what we can do. That all happened during the pandemic, when attendance was low, when we could not come to church because we're both at high risk for COVID. It's not a fair test. We haven't had a chance to show what we can do. I know people are really tired. If you're, I didn't go out, I didn't volunteer to be on the board because of COVID. If you're willing to make accommodations for people like me, I'll do it. I'm happy to do it. But we need to take those kinds of things into account. I don't think we're done yet. We were told this church only has 3 years at best if we keep going the way we're going. You know what? I don't think that's true. but if it is, I'll take it. It's how much this community means to me. We've had to say goodbye to so many people that we love. We would do anything to have 3 more years with them. And we want 3 more years with all of you. If new churches are important to the presbytery, we're a new church. Give us a chance to show that.
Let me ask you, the two of you. It seemed in the letter that came out that it's really, people going into the ministries or people in the ministry are shrinking. And there hardly are enough to go around for the churches that exist and all those who are looking for pastors. I remember back in quite a few years ago, but there was such a thing as a mission pastor. Someone who would come into new communities, and that was their role, was to come in, develop that church, provide the leadership, and get it going and growing and become an integral part of that community. Are there people like that today, or are we pretty much today spread so thin that most of these people today who are either coming out or coming out of seminary or in existence are saying, I don't want to go into that hard, rig, unknown situation. I got chances to go in where there's major churches needing pastors. They're going to pay me a good amount of money, and so that's what I'm going to probably focus my career on.
I'll speak from the ELCA. We have 7 seminaries, and I do wish I had the exact numbers because I just shared this at our Synod Assembly, but I can tell you that we have like 500 calls that are open right now, and we have less than 100 people who entered seminary this year. So it is my hope that every pastor that decides they want to go to seminary, it has a missional heart, that is on fire for Jesus and wants to talk about Jesus with people and would have communities that would be excited about that. But it is, the reality is we have a couple of congregations that have had no settled pastor for, one of them 3 years, one of them 2 years, and they can afford to pay a pastor. They can afford to pay a full-time pastor with benefits. But right now, pastors who are graduating can be very picky about where they want to live, what congregations they want to serve. Doesn't mean there isn't anybody. I'm just saying that that's a little bit of the reality that we're working with.
We call that the clergy crisis. I mean, that's the term that my colleagues and I use, and we talk about it all the time as we desperately, reach out to each other, seeking, hey, do you have an interim? I have 0 interims. I need somebody to come in. That kind of conversation at the mid-council level is the new normal.
I'd like to say one more thing. We had a congregation that was vacant for 2 years, and it was the 2nd year that the lay people said, you know what? It's really lay-led ministry, so why don't we decide? Where do we think we're going? How do we want to be in the community? And so they identified 2 people who they raised up to be their leaders, and they said, we want a pastor who's going to come and join us to do this work that we've decided we're going to do. And that has been a successful, they did finally, there was someone who was called who is serving and has joined the lay people to do the work. So lay-led ministry is growing in our denomination.
I hope you can hear me. It seems to me that we have to decide what would make a vibrant church. A full-time minister, how many members, and what would our solution be? Because if we can gather enough support to make that happen, we might as well tell the public. Because we are eating up resources that I go to the God every month, every year. And I'm not worried about where the money goes. If it's out of profit, it goes to the church, and the church will make sure that it's profit. But this church has been deteriorating for 10, 15 years. Every year this grows. Why? Because of business, I stopped coming. Before that, I was on treatment every Timothy. I was elder for like 50 years. I mean, we couldn't find anybody willing to step up to leadership because everybody in the church was old. And so a private church has to have this, a movement. Anyway, there's a lot of things they need beyond just the building. It needs the desire of the membership to gather up a plan of what it would take to become an actual vibrant, active church. And then you can talk about partitioning off the land and losing the money. But the presbytery or the city would not endorse or support the deterioration of those assets without a plan to make a vibrant church again. That's all I have.
So I think you were saying that unless there was a plan in place to show that this was going to be a vibrant church, that the money would not, might be wasted.
I'd like to ask Bishop.
Well, before you do, she just turned to me and said, "Can I take a humanity break?"
I'll let Brad speak. I asked Brad to speak to it first. Would you explain the term missional when the bishop was talking about, being a missional church? I think that's a term that many of our people aren't familiar with or understand maybe the way you and the bishop understand that.
My understanding, or my definition of missional, is mission plus relational. Let's combine those two words, where it is reaching out into the life of the community to bring God's grace, mercy, and peace, to bring God's justice into the community, and to do it in a way that is not checkbook missions, is not merely parachuting in to give a box of food and then leave. All of those things are good. I mean, you need money, food provision is still edible for 100 people. I'm not saying that that's bad, but missional is going out into the life of the community and building those relationships through which you might establish some sort of invitational, connectional relationship with people in the community, which builds up the body of Christ, both in terms of energy, enthusiasm, but also participation. And so to have that invitational and relational mission, that's my understanding, or that's my definition of being missional.
Okay. I'm asking to have you use the word missional, and I think for many of our people, that's a word we're not used to using. And so if you could explain that.
I don't know what you just said, so I'm just going to say that I think there's two aspects of growing deeper and broader. That you have disciples that are grounded and spend time knowing and reading Genesis and talking with each other, but also aware of how we talk about Jesus to our neighbors, how we talk about Jesus in the places that we go. and how we're connected with the community.
Hello, my name is Steve Ackerman. I wanted to make a couple points. I think, this discussion is good, and I think that's great. But I also feel like, I worry a little bit. It's the heat of summer. Maybe not all the congregation gets to hear this good discussion. So I would make sure that, going forward in the fall, that we continue that kind of dialogue and make sure that our entire community is involved. I also think of this as a family in Christ. And I kind of feel like when I hear words like vibrant and stuff, that wouldn't come to mind when I look at this congregation. It's more, but I think it's a family, and I think it's an important family, and so I don't want to see it dissolve just because it doesn't meet some expectation that somebody puts on people. And so I think there's a lack of credit given to the camaraderie, the community, the teaching, the mission. And again, we have dwindled quite a bit. And as Trish said, I think if it runs its course, it runs its course, but I wouldn't eject because I feel like people are still gathering strength and friendship and out of this community. As long as it's still happening, I don't see the reason to walk away from it. And I also worry that, and I see this a lot in churches, and it's not a good thing, but we become very judgmental, and I think we have to be really careful. If somebody chooses to go on their own reason, they each have their own, they have to follow their own heart. But I would hope that, again, we treat each other with respect and understand, again, I really think there's a lack of credence to the importance of this little community and what it's done historically and may do in the future. So thank you very much.
My question is one of practicality. All these things are great. It's all these things we want to do, but where are we going to get the money to do it? If the money isn't there, we can't do it. We can't manufacture that money out of no place. And if we can't get a pastor that would be amiable coming here, or if we can't get enough people to come to have enough pledges, we can't keep up. There's no way we can do it. I would rather see our funds being able to be shared amongst other areas and do some good for as many people as possible, and to kind of help enlarge the kingdom in that fashion.
So I think that it's not about the numbers, and yet it is about the numbers, right? So our $50,000 shortfall this year is with a part-time pastor. So we have to look that going forward, if we were wanting to be a vibrant community, we would need somebody full-time who had the energy to be able to energize us. Help energize us, because we can't rely only on them, right? But we need to understand that within our mission plan currently, we are bare bones. We are bare bones with 31 people attending worship on a regular basis. So who you see here today is actually more than we are normally worshiping on a Sunday morning, even in the summertime. So if our budget, if what our pledges are about 119,000, I believe, with 31,000. If we need about a $250,000 mission plan, we need twice as many giving units as we currently have, giving at the level that you are already all sacrificing to give. I don't know that people coming for the first time would be giving at that level as they grow into the church. we could have more time. But the angst that I know that I feel, I can't imagine where the board is with the angst that they feel with the conversations that they are having. To continue to lift up the Band-Aid and look to see how we're doing and then slapping the Band-Aid back down, knowing that underneath the Band-Aid it's not healing. How long can we do that? And where do we get our faith to continue to go on and talk about Jesus? I think we have the opportunity to be those seeds, not only financially, but physically in other places. Because other churches are in the same boat. If I look at our mission plan and what we're giving to the synod and to the presbytery, the question of where's the money, can it come back to us? We're giving probably about, as our congregation, less than $5,000 combined to those. So to think that they would give us $500,000 back is also a recognition of we have to understand that the money that they have, that they are so faithful with, comes from our congregations. And just like us, other congregations are struggling to continue to make sure that they give their benevolence to the larger organizations. And I think the point is we are tired. It is a lot of energy to be a mission start. The excitement that people feel to say we are feeling planted in this place. It has been a great opportunity to be part of this combined congregation. But it also tells me that we can be light wherever we go. And so I think, again, it's not only about the money, but it is about the money.
Well, since Brad outed me as a member of the Presbytery Resources Committee, you mentioned PILP loans, and you all need to understand that if we go to the Presbytery and the Presbytery says, okay, we're going to pursue a PILP loan, the loan is going to be granted based on, as Brad said, our ability to pay back that loan. Now, the Presbytery is a lot more lenient, light years more lenient than a regular lending organization. But they do expect, over time, for those loans to be paid back. And the more that resources are given to various different churches, the less resources are available within the presbytery. And I don't know what ELC has in that way. But the more they give out in the way of loans, the less they have to give out. So that's a very significant thing that we have to deal with when we're asked for resources, for additional funding through presbytery. It is, as Mary Beth said, it isn't about money, but it is about money. We've got to be able to fund, we've got to be able to manage and maintain not only the facilities, but the personnel and the congregation. And that's one of the big factors. I certainly wish it would be that we don't have to worry about money, but we do. So it's not that easy to say we could go to the presbytery or ELCA and to apply for and to get a loan. We've got to pay it back. And then if we're paying back a loan and we're still trying to fund our a minister's salary, and then also just the operational expenses, that's an additional obligation that we would have. So that's some of the reality I think we really need to think about and understand as we go forward.
Any other questions? If not, I'll go ahead and close. You have up here, Kevin.
So you've answered a number of my questions. First, there are no new pastors out there to be had, whether they're full-time, part-time, whether we can get a grant for a new pastor. It's interesting, I can't speak to the Lutheran side of it, but the Presbyterian, our side of the church, has produced 4 pastors, have ordained and supported 4 pastors to come out of this congregation. So we're giving back in any way on that end of it. Not only do we have the Beth Ami, but we also have some Al-Anon or AA people that meet here as well, and I'm sure that they have other places that they can go. Again, this is a safe place for them, and it's part of their community. This is, I'm sure, part of their community. I assume that none of the $1 million in the Lutheran from the sale of your property is available for anything on this property. Is that correct?
I think you'd have to look at your documents. I don't know the answer to that.
Kevin, I can speak a little bit and just kind of put it in a little bit of numbers. So I helped represent Gloria Day Lutheran Church when we sold the property. And the property sold for $2.4 million. We had to pay a mortgage off on that, which was around, say, $250,000, somewhere in that range. It's not that we brought all of that money here. About $1.4 million of that was put into an endowment fund to be used in ways that we see to help other people, other organizations, etc. We did bring about $500,000 here, which we've spent a little bit of money on maintenance repairs in the last couple years. I mean, and so the funding is there. There's $200,000-300,000 left, quote, at this point in time. Now, you also got to realize we've got a part-time, not a full-time office manager. We've got a part-time minister. We are not paying Ministry of Music Johnson. He is volunteering. I mean, we've got other resources or other expenditures that are out there that we're kind of skirting right now to get by and to still have a deficit, as Mary Beth said. I'm going to say it's going to be in the range of $50,000. Yeah, we do have some memorials. We do have some funds that we're probably going to look more at using at year end, that we'll be able to make the year end figure look not as bad as what reality we've been able to supply. And that's a short-term gap that may help us in the meantime. I still question, we haven't seen growth. I mean, let's face it, we unfortunately formed right during COVID, where we lost live services. A lot of people we thought that were going to be following us never did, and time kind of faded. And we haven't grown in these last couple of years. So yeah, we can limp by and get, you know, a couple years out of this place and spend the money, but is that the right thing to do? Can our resources be used to help others in different ways? And that's the big question I would have.
Which brings me to a question. Somebody had mentioned the Native American needing some work. I forget what it was, with the asbestos and so forth. Are they a growing and thriving community? Or are they like the rest of the mainline churches that are losing folks? So, but specifically, since you brought them up as an example, are they in fact a thriving, growing community? Or are we just there to support the Native American
I think it's a little bit different with the Native American community. I would call them a thriving, enduring community because they're not growing. But what I see in the Native American congregations is a consistency of generation to generation effect, where they endure from generation to generation in this kind of smallish but struggling and yet significant impact for their communities. In a majority culture congregation, what we see is a little bit different curve, if you will, of growing or not. And if you're not growing, then majority culture congregations tend to dissolve and disappear, and new ones prop up in their midst. Whereas I would not call any of our Native American congregations growing, except one up in Loop. But the vast majority of them, probably 90–95% of them, are enduring, where you just see, okay, they're because the grandparents and the parents and all the aunties are in church, they're bringing their kids, and their kids are marry, and they start to bring their kids. So a little bit different dynamic on the res than you see in the majority culture congregations.
If we were to sell the property or a portion of the property like you suggested or proposed, would we be able to use any of that money to upgrade the facility here, or would that be again lost to the presbytery or the Lutheran community to be spent elsewhere? Instead of spending the money here, we would be spending it supporting a different congregation somewhere else.
If we were to sell a portion of the property, we wouldn't just need enough money to pay the property to be in good shape. We would also need money to support a pastor, a full-time pastor, and to help whatever mission we are. So it's not just the funds to change the grounds. Does that make sense?
Well, what I'm hearing you say is it would be a partial sale of the property for the sake of income for building rehabilitation, plus income that can be used as a sufficient endowment where you can begin to have a viable operating budget. Full-time pastor, even if you keep half-time office staff, but full-time pastor, pastoral leader. And so, interest off that endowment, creating funds for that. And that's what I said earlier about that kind of plan would need to go to resources. They would look at it, make a recommendation, and it would go to the leadership commission. So we have looked at that before with other congregations, and we've said yes, and we've looked at it before and we've said no, and we've looked at it and negotiated something in between. Hey, Kevin, if you want to go to coffee, just call me. I'll come up. When I'm up at Phoenix, we'll go to coffee.
There's one more.
One more? Okay.
First and foremost, thank you, and thank you again to both Deborah Hutter and Brad. You have borne the brunt of some borderline unfair questions and have been under really attack. And I feel bad for you, and I'm thankful for you that you've been here and that you have been faithful and you have been compassionate and charitable with some of those questions. We need to be reasonable. The question was asked, do we have the energy to sustain this going forward? If I'm being honest, I don't. Are we able to meet the needs of our community? If I'm being honest with my 4 kids and my family that's been part of Gloria Day for a very, very long time and been part of the process of the merging and the coming together and the creation of Gloria Christi, I'm not confident because I know that this community cannot support the full needs of my family. How on God's earth are we possibly going to be able to meet the needs of new people coming in if we cannot even respond to the ministerial needs of the people within our midst? I really see this holding on and holding on and holding on until our hands are shaking and our bodies are shaking as selfish, as inward looking. And as much as those relationships have meant to all of you, to me, to my family, to my kids, is that faithful? Lots of questions have been asked of Brad, of Deborah, of our board. Are we asking as difficult questions of ourselves? Are we putting ourselves before God and the calling that God would have upon us? I'm willing to ask that question. I'm willing for all of you to be mad at me for asking that question because that's a question we should be asking. That's a faithful question. My wife and I had we got to spend some time away. Josh was invited to be part of a summer camp for engineering at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And my wife and I got a chance to spend some time away up there. And one of the days, we spent some time at George Washington's Mount Vernon. And we were walking this trail through a forested area of Mount Vernon. And I didn't bring a picture to share with you, so I'm just gonna have to describe it. This hugely forested area, teeming with life, and yet trees at the end of their life cycle that had fallen down. And those trees, with their histories and all the impact that they had in the ecosystem that they were a part of, even in falling down, even in no longer being living, provided for the life around them. I still maintain that while we have some resources, we have that opportunity amidst the congregations around us to be faithful and to be a part of that. Could that be a calling? Yes. Are we willing to let go of the things that are more important to us than responding to calling? I don't know. I hope we are.
Thank you, Kelly. If it's okay, let me just kind of close with this. I've been doing ministry for 43 years, a little over 43 years. Shared with somebody yesterday that I literally, my first job in the church was cleaning the toilets. So I've seen it from the bottom all the way to the top. I have mentored pastors. I've consulted with churches. I have, I've been doing a lot of different ministry. And when it comes to churches, one of the things I've noticed is that there are three attitudes that really come into play. And based upon which attitude the church expresses, I can tell you whether the church will survive or not. One of the attitudes is we have to save our church. I know of no church that has said we have to save our church that has actually survived. None. It just doesn't happen. Because the church is, well, it's the church. It's always been there. It just sort of, and in order to save it, what do? well, we cut corners here, we don't pay this bill, or we let this person go, we maneuver to try and do, and the more you cut off, the more you're going to die. The second attitude that I've seen is, well, we want our church to grow. And probably, I'm going to take a rough guess at 90% of the churches I know that's their attitude, they don't grow. Because their attitude is, we want a pastor who's going to make our church grow. You know, and the idea of the church growing, the church itself is not it's not a big enough pair of shoulders for people to really invest in. Partly because there's a church on every corner. No, I'll just go to that other church. Pastor says something I don't like, away I go. One of the deacons says something I don't like, well, I'm gone. The third attitude that I've seen is an attitude that says, we are here to see the kingdom of God grow. And I can tell you that almost every church that I've seen and been in contact, which says we are here to see the kingdom grow, grows. My first sermon with you, I don't know if you remember this, but I shared with you, hey, look, if your goal is to have the church grow, it's not going to happen. It just doesn't. Quite honestly, what I've heard a lot of today is, what can we do to save our church? I wish that I could give you a magic formula, but the realities are, even if we had a $10 million grant to bring in the latest, greatest whiz-bang preacher and fix up all of our property, out of 31 respondents to a survey, only 6 indicated that they actually had the energy to help the kingdom of God move ahead. 6. That's a tough fact to deal with. I wish that it weren't true, but the question's been raised of, well, we're kind of a new church. We've only been doing this for 3 years. Littleton First Presbyterian Church, in a year and a half, went from 35 to 100. Churches are growing again. The church I retired from, when I retired, they were at about 45. Last I peaked, I know I'm not supposed to do that, but I peaked anyway. They were up around 80. Churches are beginning to thrive again, even after COVID. But we've continued to decline. The board is going to prayerfully talk about all of this. The process is that the board is not the ones that make the decision. I had somebody say, well, when's the board going to decide? Well, the board doesn't decide. You all decide. The board is simply going to make a recommendation, and a recommendation of a direction and a date to gather together and vote. I don't know exactly what that's going to be. We're going to have that discussion as a board, and we will keep you appraised and informed as to what those steps are as we go along. Any questions on the process of it? No? Okay. I know that you're not the great tennis player. I apologize for calling you Federer. Bishop Hutter, would you close us in prayer?
Holy One, we come to you this day knowing that there are no easy decisions, knowing that you are here and that your Holy Spirit moves in and through each individual that is here, those who have had to leave, but those who have a heart for this place, for this ministry, for the relationships that have sustained and grown and nurtured the gift of faith. So we ask again for your discernment, for your wisdom. Help us to do the things that must be done. And you know what the hearts are here and the energy is here. And more than anything, help us to know that whatever might happen, that you live and have this community's faith has been nurtured by you and by all of the ways in which this church has been formed. And so as we leave this day, we leave with heavy hearts, but remind us that there's also a joyfulness in our steps, because we know that we are people who believe in life, death, and resurrection. And that happens with us each and every day, as well as with our churches and places in which we experience life. So thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the courage to have the conversation. Thank you for the ways in which people have been able to talk and share their views. And in all of this, we ask that we would have the energy to do what yet needs to be done this day. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.